I will tell you a story unlike any other. A story of love turned to poison, of trust shattered beyond repair. Three sisters, once inseparable, fell for the same man, a man who whispered the same sweet lies to each of them, turning their love into a battleground. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. The wind howled through the valley, carrying whispers of love, betrayal, and a name that made hearts tremble: Daniel. Daniel was not the richest man in town, nor the most handsome, but he had a charm that wrapped around hearts like a vine. Women melted under his gaze, and words flowed from his lips like honey. But no one was more captivated than the three sisters, Amara, Bella, and Celeste. They were daughters of a respected merchant, each unique in her own way. Amara was the eldest, sharp-eyed and fiery, with a voice that commanded attention. Bella, the middle sister, was soft-spoken but beautiful, her gentle nature making people trust her easily. Celeste, the youngest, was wild and free, with a heart that longed for adventure. Their bond was unbreakable, or so they thought, until Daniel entered their lives. It began with stolen glances and secret letters. Amara was the first to fall, drawn in by his clever words. Then Bella, who believed his promises of devotion, and finally Celeste, who thought she had captured his heart for herself. None of them knew they were sharing the same love. But the truth has a way of crawling out of the shadows. It started with whispers in the market, murmurs of Daniel's presence at different homes on different nights. Then Amara found a letter not meant for her. Bella noticed the way his eyes flickered when he spoke to another. Celeste, ever curious, followed him one evening and saw him with someone she never expected, her own sister. The storm broke. Amara accused Bella of betrayal. Bella wept, swearing she had been deceived. Celeste, torn between anger and heartbreak, screamed that Daniel was a liar. But none of them wanted to listen. The pain was too raw, the jealousy too fierce. Daniel, watching from the shadows, smiled. He did not love them. He never had. Love was a game, and he was the master. While they fought, he watched, knowing he had won. Weeks passed, and the sisters no longer spoke. The house that once echoed with laughter was now silent. Their mother, weary with grief, tried to bring them together, but pride stood like a wall between them. Daniel continued his game. Other women fell under his spell, but none as deeply as the sisters had. He played with hearts, then discarded them like old toys. And when the town finally saw his true nature, it was too late. Too many hearts had already been shattered. One fateful evening, Amara, Bella, and Celeste found themselves in the same place, the town square. They had avoided each other for so long, yet fate had drawn them together once more. And there he was. Daniel stood with another woman, whispering the same words he had once told them. A cruel smile played on his lips, his hands caressing another as though the past meant nothing. Something shifted in them. The pain was still there, but it no longer burned against each other. It burned toward him. The realization struck like lightning. He had used them, turned them against one another, and walked away untouched. Amara stepped forward first, her voice steady. "We were fools." Bella lifted her chin, but no longer. Celeste smiled for the first time in months. "Let's finish this." Daniel turned, his confident smirk faltering as he saw them, standing together, eyes blazing. For the first time, he was afraid, and that was only the beginning. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine as the three sisters stepped closer. Their eyes no longer held love, only something far more dangerous, clarity. For the first time, he was not in control. He forced a smirk, but his voice betrayed him. "Ladies, I didn't expect to see you together." Amara tilted her head. "Neither did we." Bella folded her arms. "But we're here now." Celeste's eyes sparkled with mischief. "And we have unfinished business." The woman beside Daniel, oblivious to the storm brewing, frowned. "Who are they?" Daniel's tongue darted over his lips. "No one important." A laugh broke from Amara, cold and sharp. "Is that what you told us when we were her?" The woman's face paled. She looked at Daniel, waiting for an explanation, but none came. Bella leaned in, her voice sweet. "Has he told you about the moonlit walks?" Celeste twirled a loose strand of hair. "Or the promises of forever?" The woman's expression shifted from confusion to something darker. "Daniel?" Daniel reached for her hand, but she stepped back. I think I should go." She hurried away, leaving Daniel standing alone. The sisters didn't move. They didn't need to. For the first time, Daniel felt small. The market was quiet now, eyes peeking from behind stalls, whispers curling in the air. His charm had unravelled, his mask slipping. He chuckled, but it was hollow. "So, this is revenge?" Amara stepped forward. "Not revenge." Bella's lips curled. "Justice." Celeste grinned. "And we're just getting started." Daniel took a step back. "You can't do anything to me." "Oh, but we can," Amara whispered. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the sisters turned and walked away together. Daniel let out a breath, his heart pounding. He had won so many times before, but something told him this was different. This was war, and he was no longer the one pulling the strings. That night, the sisters sat together for the first time in months. The walls of their home, once thick with silence, now hummed with quiet understanding. Amara poured tea, her fingers steady. "We let him divide us." Bella sighed. "And he almost won." Celeste smiled. "Almost." A slow fire burned between them. Not one of hatred, but of purpose. They had been played, used like pawns, but not any more. Not ever again. Amara met their eyes. "We make sure he never does this to anyone else." Bella nodded. "And we take back what he stole." Celeste's grin was wicked. "I have an idea." Outside, the wind carried their whispers into the night, weaving a new story, one where the hunter became the hunted. And Daniel? He had no idea the game had just begun. The night was thick with silence, but inside the sisters' home a storm was brewing. Celeste leaned in, eyes glinting with mischief. "What does Daniel fear the most?" Amara smirked. "Losing control." Bella exhaled slowly. "Then we take it from him." Their bond, once fragile, was now unshakable. The pain he caused had forged something stronger, revenge wrapped in justice. But they didn't want to destroy him in the usual way. No, that would be too easy. They wanted to unravel him, piece by piece. The next morning, Daniel walked through the town square, head high, forcing a confident stride. But something felt different. Eyes followed him, women whispered, men smirked. He clenched his jaw. What was happening? Then he saw it, a small parchment nailed to the town's notice board, fluttering in the wind. Curious, he stepped closer. "Daniel loves no one. He only loves the game. Beware, ladies, you are just his next move." A chill ran down his spine. He turned sharply, searching the crowd, but no one met his gaze. Then laughter. Soft, knowing. He whipped around just in time to see three figures slipping into the shadows, Amara, Bella, Celeste. His heartbeat quickened. They were behind this. Of course they were. He yanked the parchment down, crumpling it in his fist, but it was too late. The whispers had already spread. His power was slipping, and the sisters were just getting started. That evening the sisters sat on the rooftop of their home, watching the town below. Bella sighed. "He's rattled." Celeste grinned. "Good." Amara sipped her tea, watching the moon rise. "But we're not done." They weren't just going to expose Daniel. They were going to make him feel what they had felt. Doubt, jealousy, powerlessness. The game had changed, and this time the sisters held the winning hand. Daniel sat in his dimly lit room, staring at his own reflection in the mirror. His hands gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles white. They thought they could beat him. They thought they were smarter. He exhaled slowly, a dangerous smirk creeping across his face. Let them try. He had played this game longer than they had. But deep inside, a whisper of uncertainty crept in. For the first time, Daniel wasn't sure if he was the hunter or the hunted. The night wrapped itself around the town like a cloak, thick with secrets and silent battles. Daniel sat in his room, staring at the flickering candle, his mind a storm of thoughts. He had underestimated them. He had always been in control, always one step ahead. But now the power had shifted, and he could feel it slipping through his fingers like sand. The sisters weren't just exposing him, they were playing with him. And that terrified him. Morning arrived, but peace did not. Daniel walked through the market, his usual confidence strained. The air around him felt different, like a web closing in. A woman selling fruit smirked as he passed. A group of men chuckled, shaking their heads. Then he saw it. Another parchment nailed to a wooden post. How many hearts will Daniel break before he's broken himself? Heat rushed to his face. He ripped it down, but it didn't matter. The damage was already done. Then a voice, soft, familiar. Feeling cornered? He turned sharply, and there they were, Amara, Bella, and Celeste. Standing together, watching him. Daniel forced a smirk. "This little game of yours is amusing." Celeste tilted her head, smiling. "Oh, but Daniel, we're just getting started." Bella stepped closer, her voice like silk. "Tell us, how does it feel?" Amara's eyes gleamed. To lose? For the first time in his life, Daniel had no words. Because he wasn't sure if he was playing anymore, or if he had already lost. That night, the sisters gathered in their candlelit room, the scent of ink and parchment filling the air. "This isn't enough," Amara said, tapping her fingers on the table. "We need to make him feel it." Bella's eyes darkened. "We need to make him doubt himself." Celeste grinned. "What if we turn his own tricks against him?" A plan began to form, one that would shake Daniel to his core, one that would make him question everything. The next day, Daniel received a letter. "Meet me at the bridge at midnight, alone. I know what you did. No name, no clues." But Daniel's blood ran cold, because for the first time, he didn't know who was pulling the strings. The letter burned in Daniel's hands. The ink was bold, the message clear. Someone knew, someone was watching, and for the first time he wasn't sure who. His mind raced. It had to be the sisters. Who else had reason to torment him? But something about the note felt different. It wasn't just a warning, it was a trap. Still, he had no choice. If there was even the slightest chance that someone knew something, something that could ruin him, he had to act first. Midnight. The bridge. He would go, but he would not go alone. The sisters watched from the rooftop of their home, the cool night breeze brushing against their skin. Below them, Daniel moved through the empty streets, his steps careful, his posture tense. "He's nervous," Bella murmured. Amara smirked. "Good." Celeste stretched her arms. "I almost feel bad for him." Bella glanced at her. "Do you?" Celeste grinned. Not even a little. Their plan was working. Slowly, steadily, Daniel was unravelling. The man who once controlled every move was now reacting, second-guessing, and they weren't even finished yet. Daniel arrived at the bridge, shadows stretching long beneath the moonlight. He scanned the area, muscles tight, silence, stillness, but he wasn't fooled. Someone was here. He took a step forward. "I don't like games." His voice was steady, though his heart pounded. "If you have something to say, say it." A whisper drifted through the air, soft, familiar. "You were always good at games, Daniel." His breath hitched. The voice came from the darkness, from everywhere and nowhere. His fists clenched. "Who's there?" Silence. Then laughter, not cruel, not mocking, worse, knowing. Daniel turned sharply, scanning the trees, the path, the bridge itself. Nothing. Then footsteps, slow, measured. His pulse spiked. He wasn't alone. A shadow moved from the darkness. A figure in a cloak, face hidden beneath the hood. Daniel's hands curled into fists. "Who are you?" The figure tilted its head. "Who do you think?" Something about the voice sent chills through him. It was distorted, unfamiliar, yet hauntingly close. Daniel forced a smirk. "If you think you can scare me—" The figure stepped closer. "Scare you?" A soft chuckle. "Oh, Daniel, we don't want to scare you." Daniel's smirk faded. "We." Before he could react, the wind carried another whisper. From behind him, another voice, soft, sweet, dangerous. "We want to destroy you." A hand touched his shoulder. Daniel spun, but there was no one there. His breath came fast, his mind racing. This wasn't just a trick. This was something else. Something he couldn't control. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt what it was like to be hunted. And the sisters. They were just getting started. The night pressed in around Daniel, thick and suffocating. The whispers had stopped, but their echo lingered in his mind, wrapping around his thoughts like a noose. He wasn't alone, and that terrified him. Daniel took a slow step back, his hands curled into fists. "If you think this will break me, you're wrong." Silence. Then a soft voice, dripping with amusement. "Are we?" The hairs on his neck stood on end. The voice had come from behind him, but he had seen nothing. No movement, no sign of life. A trick. It had to be a trick. Daniel's breathing grew shallow as he turned sharply, scanning the darkness. His instincts screamed at him to leave, but his pride held him in place. The sisters had underestimated him. They thought they could control him, but they were just women. And he, the bridge groaned beneath him, his breath hitched. He wasn't moving, but something else was. Daniel's pulse hammered in his throat as a shadow shifted on the far end of the bridge. Not a figure, not a person. A presence, watching, waiting. Daniel forced a smirk, though his voice wavered. "You can play your little games, but in the end I always win." Soft laughter drifted through the night. "Oh, Daniel!" His blood ran cold. That voice! It was hers. Celeste stepped forward, the moonlight catching the sharp glint in her eyes. But she wasn't alone. Amara, Bella. All three of them stood together, blocking the only way off the bridge. Daniel took a step back. The sisters didn't move, didn't blink. They simply watched him. Unshaken, unbroken. Amara tilted her head. "What's wrong, Daniel? You look nervous." Daniel forced himself to laugh. "You think cornering me will change anything?" Bella's smile was almost pitying. "No, Daniel, we don't need to change anything." Celeste's eyes gleamed. "We just need to show you what it feels like." The wind picked up, swirling around them, carrying the weight of unspoken words. Daniel clenched his fists. He wouldn't let them win. He couldn't. He took another step back. His foot met air. His stomach lurched. He hadn't realized how close he was to the edge. The river roared below, black and endless. His balance wavered. A sharp intake of breath. Then a hand shot out. Not to push, to hold. Daniel's heart pounded as Amara's fingers gripped his wrist, steadying him. He stared at her, breathless, confused. Amara's grip was firm, her expression unreadable. "We could have let you fall," she murmured, "but that would have been too easy." Daniel swallowed hard. "Then what do you want?" Bella leaned in. "We want you to feel what we felt." Celeste's voice was a whisper. Doubt, fear, powerlessness. Daniel's jaw clenched. He wouldn't break. He couldn't. But deep inside, a terrifying thought clawed its way to the surface. What if he already had? The sisters stepped back, releasing him. Daniel stumbled, regaining his footing, his breath ragged. The bridge was silent. The game had changed. And, for the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't sure he was playing anymore. He was simply trying to survive. Daniel stood frozen, his pulse hammering in his ears. The sisters weren't speaking. They weren't moving. They only watched. And somehow that was worse. His pride screamed at him to speak, to regain control. But for the first time in his life, words failed him. The silence stretched. Then Amara smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made his skin crawl. "You feel it now, don't you?" Daniel's fists clenched. "Feel what?" Bella stepped closer, her voice a whisper of mock sympathy. The fear, the uncertainty, the helplessness. Celeste tilted her head. "Doesn't feel good, does it?" Daniel scoffed, but the sound was weak. This doesn't change anything." Amara's smile widened. "Oh, Daniel," Bella leaned in, "it changes everything." Daniel swallowed hard. He wanted to argue. He wanted to mock them. But the truth was clawing at his throat, refusing to be ignored. They weren't afraid of him anymore, and that meant he had already lost. The sisters left him standing there, alone on the bridge, the night pressing in like a closing fist. They didn't have to say anything else. They had planted the seed, and Daniel would water it with his own fear. Back at their home, the sisters sat in quiet victory. Bella ran a finger along the rim of her cup. "He's slipping," Celeste smirked. "I almost expected him to be big." Amara exhaled. "Not yet, but soon." They weren't done. Not even close, because Daniel had made them feel small, and now it was his turn. For the next few days, Daniel felt it everywhere. The shift, the whispers. The eyes that used to admire him now watched him with something else. Pity, doubt, distrust. It was like he had been pulled from his own story, forced to play a role he didn't recognize. A man unraveling, and the worst part, the sisters didn't have to do anything. They had already won, but Daniel wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet, because if he was going down, he was taking them with him. And this time, he wouldn't play fair. Daniel sat in his dimly lit room, fingers tapping against the wooden table. The whispers in town had grown louder, the gazes sharper. His once unshakable charm had turned to dust. He was losing. No, he had already lost. The sisters had done what no one else could. They had turned his own game against him. And now the world saw him for what he was, a fraud, a manipulator, a man with no real power. But he wasn't done. Not yet. If they thought he would simply fade into nothing, they were wrong. Daniel wasn't built to lose, and if he couldn't win, he would burn everything down with him. The night was thick with storm clouds when the sisters heard the first knock. A slow, deliberate knock, 3 times. Amara glanced at Bella, then Celeste. No one moved. Then another knock, harder this time. Bella's fingers curled. "It's him." Celeste smirked. "He's finally come to beg." But Amara wasn't so sure. Something about the air felt wrong, heavy. Cautiously, she stepped forward and unlatched the door. Daniel stood there, rain-soaked, eyes shadowed, but there was no desperation in them, only something far more dangerous, resignation, and beneath it, madness. "I was wrong," he said softly, stepping forward. "I underestimated you." Amara held her ground. "Yes, you did." A slow smile tugged at Daniel's lips. "And now you underestimate me." Before they could react, he reached into his coat and pulled out a single lantern, lit, alive, and in his other hand, oil, a heartbeat of silence. Then he threw it. The flame met oil, and the world exploded into chaos. Fire spread like a living thing, devouring wood, crawling up the walls. Smoke filled the air, thick and suffocating. The sisters barely had time to react before the heat became unbearable. Daniel stood just outside, watching, unmoving. His expression was unreadable. "You took everything from me," he murmured. "So now I take everything from you." Bella coughed, pulling at Celeste's arm. "We have to move." The flames climbed higher, licking the ceiling. The house, their home, was collapsing around them. Daniel turned away. He had won, or so he thought. Just as he reached the edge of the street, a voice cut through the roar of fire, not broken, not afraid, sharp, strong, unyielding. "You think this is the end?" Daniel froze. Slowly he turned back, and there they were, 3 figures stepping out of the inferno, their silhouettes dark against the flames. Alive, unshaken, unstoppable. Smoke clung to their skin, fire reflected in their eyes. They looked like something out of legend, like something more than human. Daniel took a step back. For the first time, true fear bled into his veins. This wasn't supposed to happen. They should have been destroyed. Instead, they had become something else. Something terrifying. Amara's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. "You don't get to end this, Daniel." Bella's voice was cold as steel. "You only lit the fire." Celeste's eyes gleamed. "Now watch it consume you." The wind howled, feeding the flames, feeding the storm. And for the first time, Daniel realized he wasn't the hunter anymore. He was the prey. The sisters stepped forward, and Daniel ran. He ran into the night, into the unknown, knowing deep in his soul this wasn't over, not yet, not ever.